There's a strange irony in how WWE, once masterful in long-term storytelling, managed to suffocate the legacy of what was arguably its most historically significant rivalry between John Cena and Randy Orton. In many ways, this feud was supposed to be the safest of safeties, a matchup that needed only minimal effort to evoke nostalgia, excitement, and genuine emotion. And yet, as the final chapter of their saga unfolded at Backlash 2025, the reality is clearer than ever. WWE botched it. They didn't just underdeliver, they deflated the meaning of two careers that had danced in parallel and collided in fiery clashes for over 2 decades. What could have been the definitive exclamation mark was instead a flat, corporate-driven ellipsis. Let's not kid ourselves. On paper, Cena versus Orton in St. Louis should have been bulletproof. Orton in front of his hometown crowd. Cena's heel reign fresh off the shockwaves of Elimination Chamber. The undisputed WWE Championship on the line. A lifetime of history between two men whose intertwined paths defined an era. And yet, the booking and creative framework around this match undermined everything that once made Cena versus Orton electric. It begins with how WWE has handled Cena's heel turn itself. For over a decade, fans clamored for a dark, antagonistic version of John Cena. When it finally arrived in 2025, it came not as an organic evolution of character, but as an overtly manufactured corporate tool, dripping in sanitized malice instead of raw unpredictability. Cena's heel persona has been less of an embodiment of ruthlessness and more of a boardroom-approved anti-hero designed to generate merchandise sales from older demographics. When that corporate sheen overlays a feud with someone as naturally dangerous and vengeful as Randy Orton, it strips away the tension. Cena's current character doesn't seem genuinely capable of the malice required to rekindle the depth of animosity that made their rivalry famous in the late 2000s. Back then, it was personal. Fiery promos, blood feuds, and a tangible sense of competition over who truly was the face of WWE. Today, it is theater with no pulse. Furthermore, the match itself at Backlash was a microcosm of WWE's misunderstanding of how to close legacy rivalries. In the past, Cena versus Orton bouts had balance, a careful back and forth of finishers, reversals, and believable near falls that told the story of two men who knew each other inside out. This latest encounter, however, devolved into a circus of overproduced spots and clunky interference. R-Truth's inexplicable involvement is a glaring symptom of WWE's over-reliance on nostalgia and comedy relief to mask creative bankruptcy. Having R-Truth play a pivotal role in what was meant to be an iconic climax devalued the gravity of Cena and Orton's decades-long war. Truth is beloved, no doubt, but inserting him here reeked of desperation, an attempt to generate memes instead of moments. Worse still was Cena's post-match decision to deliver an attitude adjustment to Truth, rather than portraying a calculating heel who respects no alliances and burns every bridge. Cena instead came across as fickle and erratic, damaging the credibility of his character development. The structure of the match reflected WWE's modern malaise, with pacing and emotional weight. While there were admittedly well-executed RKOs and attitude adjustments, the match felt like a hollow echo of their classic bouts rather than a meaningful evolution. Tables were broken, signature sequences repeated, but it all played out as a parody of their past rather than an homage. Instead of storytelling that acknowledged their shared history, the betrayals, the championship struggles, the personal vendettas, the bout felt like a greatest hits playlist performed with no passion. There was no emotional escalation, no callbacks to their iconic Iron Man match, or their Hell in a Cell clash. No nods to the psychological warfare that defined their prime. WWE had a golden opportunity to have Orton call back to his legend killer days, or for Cena to reference the trials of carrying the company on his back, while Orton lurked as his eternal rival. None of that narrative richness was leveraged. More damaging than the content of the match, however, was the lack of stakes. This feud had, at one point, been the anchor of WWE's main event scene, drawing arenas to their feet and polarizing fans across every city. But this latest chapter had no consequence. Cena retained the title, and Orton, after weeks of subdued promos and low-energy build, slid back into irrelevance. There was no sense that the outcome mattered beyond another notch in Cena's title defenses. Orton didn't look like a man desperate to reclaim glory or avenge old wounds. He looked like a legend collecting a paycheck in his hometown, and WWE framed it as such, leaning on video packages and superficial nostalgia pops rather than crafting a feud that demanded our investment. The most egregious failure lies in the fact that WWE positioned this match as a possible final chapter and then refused to honor that designation with meaningful storytelling. When careers reach their twilight, rivalries deserve closure that resonates beyond the bell. Cena versus Orton had all the ingredients to be WWE's Rock versus Austin 3 moment, where the feud doesn't need a stipulation or a title because the weight of history is enough. Instead, they diluted it with title implications that felt arbitrary and an atmosphere that prioritized hollow spectacle over substance. Orton's character has suffered under this approach. He should have been framed as Cena's mirror, a man who, despite all his transgressions, shared an intimate understanding of what it meant to be WWE's standard bearer. The story of two aging titans realizing that their paths inevitably lead back to each other could have been a poignant exploration of legacy, regret, and unfinished business. But WWE treated it like just another main event, slotting in celebrity cameos and production tropes that drained it of any gravitas. It's not just this match, it's the years of mismanagement leading up to it. Every time WWE teased reigniting Cena versus Orton post-2014, they did so with diminishing returns, whether through half-hearted Royal Rumble encounters, tag team combinations, or multi-man matches that diluted their dynamic. WWE chipped away at the specialness of their rivalry. By the time Backlash 2025 arrived, even the most die-hard fans knew better than to expect fireworks. The feud had become a skeleton draped in recycled catchphrases and forgettable promos. WWE's stubborn refusal to evolve Orton's character in parallel with Cena's heel turn only made matters worse. While Cena reinvented himself, even if imperfectly, Orton was left to rely on old habits. Gone was the cold-blooded tactician or the maniacal manipulator. In his place was a slow-moving veteran coasting on reputation rather than relevance. If we're being brutally honest, the Cena-Orton rivalry's decay is emblematic of WWE's broader creative decline over the past decade. The company's obsession with corporate polish, brand consistency, and risk-averse storytelling has stripped its rivalries of the raw emotion that once made wrestling transcend entertainment. Cena and Orton, once avatars of ambition and animosity, became pawns in a sanitized machine that values content churn over catharsis. WWE's booking of this feud, post-2020, has been driven less by narrative coherence and more by quarterly revenue bumps tied to nostalgia events. Their clashes were slotted into Saudi Arabia showcases, anniversary specials, and premium live events where context was sacrificed for superficial spectacle. Fans were expected to cheer out of habit rather than investment. At Backlash 2025, that hollowness was glaring. Orton's hometown crowd was subdued, not because they didn't care, but because WWE had given them no reason to believe this encounter mattered beyond marketing. Cena's heel persona, instead of drawing visceral boos, elicited apathetic murmurs because it lacked authenticity. And R-Truth's involvement, rather than adding levity or intrigue, reduced the match's climax to a punchline. When Cena lifted R-Truth for an attitude adjustment post-match, it felt like WWE was signaling that entertainment value trumped emotional resolution. There was no catharsis, no mutual respect, no shocking betrayal, just a flat ending to a rivalry that once defined a generation. The aftermath compounds the issue. WWE's handling of both Cena and Orton post-Backlash leaves no clear trajectory. Cena remains champion, but his heel run lacks credible challengers that can match the historical weight Orton brought. Orton, meanwhile, fades back into semi-retirement purgatory, stripped of momentum and relevance. There's no sense that this chapter mattered in their legacies. No lasting images, no quotes, no callbacks that future superstars can reference as touchstones of greatness. WWE has erased the tapestry of one of its richest rivalries by reducing it to a series of disjointed encounters designed to fill pay-per-view slots rather than elevate mythology. It's the indifference that cuts deeper than even the worst booking missteps of past eras, because Cena versus Orton should have been bulletproof to apathy. The most damning part of Backlash 2025 wasn't that the crowd turned on the match. It was that they sat back and watched with a muted reverence, as if they were spectators at a ceremony rather than participants in a fight. There's a dangerous phenomenon in WWE today where nostalgia becomes a sedative rather than an accelerant. This match embodied that. Fans knew they were supposed to care, but the company's years of half-hearted storytelling had worn down their ability to emotionally invest, and so they clapped politely, chanted when prompted, and ultimately left the arena without the visceral afterglow that defined the rivalry's peak years. One of the subtler failures in this latest chapter is how WWE neglected the psychology that once made their encounters fascinating. Cena and Orton built their legacy on matches where every movement felt deliberate, where Orton's cold, methodical pace clashed with Cena's fiery resilience. Backlash 2025 ignored that nuance in favor of formulaic, high-spot-driven sequences that did not suit two veterans whose chemistry was more cerebral than acrobatic. When Orton slapped on a headlock in 2009, it meant something. It was a tactic to grind Cena down, to sap the energy from the match and dictate pace.